What happens when one of the most respected actors in the world sits down for what should be a simple interview, only to face an onslaught of disrespect that crosses every line imaginable? In just 47 seconds, a single dismissive comment from host Denise Welch would ignite a firestorm that turned a daytime talk show into absolute chaos and ended with a legendary Hollywood icon walking off the set in disgust. The Loose Women studio had that familiar energy, bright lights, the panel of hosts sitting behind their curved desk, and the audience settled in for what they thought would be another pleasant afternoon chat. Anthony Hopkins, the Oscar-winning actor known for his powerful performances and quiet dignity, had agreed to come on the show to discuss his latest project. He walked onto the set with his characteristic humility, shaking hands with the panel, offering warm smiles to the audience, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. So Denise Welch sat in the center position, flanked by fellow panelists Ruth Langsford, Janet Street Porter, and Colleen Nolan. The opening moments seemed friendly enough. Hopkins settled into the guest chair, adjusted his microphone, and prepared for what he assumed would be a straightforward conversation about his work, his craft, and perhaps some light-hearted anecdotes from his decades in the industry. Denise started with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So, Anthony, lovely to have you here. Now, I have to say, I watched your new film over the weekend." Hopkins nodded politely. "Oh, wonderful. I hope you enjoyed it." "Well," Denise said, leaning back with an air of casual superiority, "I have to be honest. I found it rather boring, actually. I mean, all that quiet, brooding intensity. Is that really acting, or are you just being yourself?" The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence. Ruth Langsford shifted in her seat, her eyes widening slightly. Janet Street Porter glanced sideways at Denise with a look that said she couldn't believe those words had just come out of her mouth. Colleen Nolan stared down at her notes, clearly trying to distance herself from what was happening. Hopkins, ever the professional, took a breath and responded with remarkable composure. "Well, acting is about finding truth in a character, bringing authenticity to the role. Sometimes that means stillness, subtlety. Not everything needs to be loud or obvious." Denise waved her hand dismissively. Yes, but honestly, I think people are tired of that old-school method acting nonsense. We want entertainment, not some self-important art project." The audience gasped audibly. A woman in the third row shook her head in disbelief. A man near the front folded his arms, his face showing clear disapproval. Janet Street Porter jumped in, trying to redirect. "Anthony, I think what's fascinating about your career is the range you've shown over the years. From Hannibal Lecter to more gentle roles, you've really done it all." Hopkins smiled gratefully at Janet. "Thank you, yes. I've been very fortunate to play many different characters. Each one teaches you something new about human nature, about yourself. You know, I've always believed that acting is about service. You're serving the story, serving the character, serving the audience. When it's not about ego." "Oh, here we go," Denise muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Hopkins paused, looking at her with curiosity. "I'm sorry, did you say something?" "I just find all this talk about service and character a bit pretentious, if I'm being honest," Denise said, leaning back in her chair with a smirk. Ruth Langsford's eyes widened. "Denise, that's incredibly rude." "I'm just being honest, Ruth. Isn't that what we do here? Be honest?" "There's honest, and then there's disrespectful," Colleen interjected. "And you've crossed that line." But Denise wasn't finished. She cut back in, her voice dripping with condescension. "Human nature, right? Tell me, do you ever worry that you've just been playing the same character over and over again? Because from where I'm sitting, it all looks rather similar. Serious man, serious face, serious voice." The audience gasped. Ruth Langsford tried to intervene. "Denise, I think that's a bit unfair. Anthony has won an Academy Award, a BAFTA, multiple Golden Globes. His range is pretty well established. Denise shot Ruth a look. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, Ruth. We're supposed to be honest on this show, aren't we? Nobody's thinking that, Janet said flatly. You're projecting your own opinions as if they're universal truth. They're not. Denise turned to Janet with irritation. Oh, so now you're the expert on what everyone thinks. I'm saying that your opinion is not everyone's opinion, Janet replied. And even if it were, there's a way to express disagreement without being insulting. Hopkins remained calm, though anyone watching closely could see the slight tension in his jaw. I respect that you have your opinion. Not everyone will connect with every performance, and that's perfectly fine. Art is subjective. What moves one person might not move another. That's the beauty of it, actually. Oh, art, Denise said with a laugh that felt mean-spirited. There we go with the art talk again. You actors love to go on about art, don't you? Meanwhile, the rest of us are just trying to make telly that people actually want to watch. And what's wrong with art? Colleen asked, her voice rising. What's wrong with taking your craft seriously? With trying to create something meaningful? Nothing's wrong with it, Denise said. I'm just saying it's not as deep as they all make it out to be. You stand in front of a camera and say some lines. It's not curing cancer. Oh, art, Denise said with a laugh that felt mean-spirited. There we go with the art talk again. You actors love to go on about art, don't you? Meanwhile, the rest of us are just trying to make telly that people actually want to watch. Colleen Nolan finally spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. Denise, come on now. Anthony is our guest. Let's talk about the new project properly. Denise turned to Colleen with barely concealed irritation. I am talking about it properly. I'm giving him real feedback, not just blowing smoke like everyone else does. Hopkins leaned forward slightly. I appreciate honesty, I really do. But there's a difference between honest critique and simple rudeness. I came here today as a guest, expecting a conversation, not an ambush. Ambush? Denise's voice rose. This is a talk show, Anthony. We ask questions. We challenge people. If you can't handle that, maybe you should stick to your little film sets where everyone treats you like royalty. The audience murmured, clearly uncomfortable. Ruth Langsford looked absolutely mortified. Denise, that's completely out of line. Janet Street Porter nodded in agreement. Seriously, what are you doing right now? But Denise was on a roll, seemingly energized by the conflict. What I'm doing is what we're supposed to do on this show. I'm being real. I'm saying what needs to be said. Not everyone is impressed by Hollywood legends who think they're above criticism. Hopkins sat very still, his hands folded in his lap. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried tremendous weight. I have never, in my entire career, claimed to be above criticism. I've had my share of failures, of performances that didn't land, of films that didn't work. I've learned from all of it. But what you're doing right now isn't criticism. It's cruelty disguised as honesty. Oh, please, Denise scoffed. Don't be so dramatic. Though I suppose that's what you do, isn't it? Everything's a performance. Ruth Langsford had clearly had enough. Denise, stop it. Right now. This is embarrassing. Denise whipped around to face Ruth. You know what's embarrassing, Ruth? The way everyone in this industry fawns over these actors like they're gods. They're just people doing a job. Same as us. Except we're not treating them like they're beneath us, Janet Street Porter shot back. What's gotten into you today? Hopkins stood up slowly, carefully removing his microphone pack. The entire studio watched in stunned silence. His movements were deliberate, dignified. I've been in this business for over 50 years, he said, his voice steady and clear. I've done interviews in dozens of countries, on hundreds of shows. I've been asked tough questions, challenging questions, questions that made me think deeply about my work and my choices. But never, in all that time, have I been treated with such blatant disrespect. Denise crossed her arms. Oh, so now you're going to storm off? How very diva of you. I'm not storming anywhere, Hopkins replied calmly. I'm making a choice. I choose not to sit here and be insulted for your entertainment. I choose not to participate in whatever this is. Colleen Nolan stood up as well, reaching out toward Hopkins. Anthony, please, I'm so sorry. This isn't what we're about, I promise you. Hopkins gave her a kind smile. I believe you, Colleen. And Ruth, Janet, thank you for trying to bring some dignity to this conversation. But I won't stay where I'm not respected. Denise let out an exasperated sigh. Unbelievable. We finally get someone to show a bit of backbone on this show, and the guest can't handle it. Hopkins turned to look at her directly. Backbone? Is that what you call this? I call it bullying. I call it using your position as host to belittle someone for no reason other than your own ego. You asked me on this show. I didn't beg to be here. I came in good faith, ready to have a conversation. But you never wanted a conversation, did you? You wanted a target. The audience erupted in applause. It started with a few people and quickly spread throughout the studio. Ruth Langsford was applauding too, not even trying to hide it. Janet Street Porter had her arms crossed but was nodding in approval. Denise's face flushed red. Oh, so now the audience is against me? Typical. You all just want your precious celebrities to be coddled. We want guests to be treated with basic respect, someone shouted from the audience. Hopkins gathered his things, his coat draped over his arm. I've played villains, monsters, complex, morally ambiguous characters. I've spent my career exploring the dark corners of human nature. But I've rarely encountered someone so committed to their own unpleasantness. How dare you? Denise sputtered. How dare I? Hopkins replied, his voice rising for the first time. How dare you? You sit there in your position of power, behind your desk, surrounded by your colleagues, and you use that platform to tear someone down. For what? For ratings? For attention? Because you think it makes you look strong? Ruth Langsford stood up now too. Anthony is right. Denise, you've crossed a line today. A major line. Janet Street Porter chimed in. I've known you for years, Denise, and I've never seen you act like this. What's happened to you? Denise stood up, her chair scraping loudly. What's happened to me? Nothing's happened to me. I'm the same person I've always been. Maybe the rest of you have just gone soft. There's nothing soft about treating people with kindness, Colleen said quietly. Hopkins walked toward the exit, but before he left, he turned back one more time. You know what the saddest part of this is? You have a platform that millions of people watch. You could use it to inspire, to uplift, to have meaningful conversations. Instead, you use it for this, to make yourself feel big by making others feel small. That's not strength, Denise. That's weakness. The audience applauded again, louder this time. Some people were even standing. Denise's voice was shaking now, whether from anger or something else. It was hard to tell. Get out then. Go back to your ivory tower. See if I care. I don't expect you to care, Hopkins said. That's been abundantly clear from the moment I sat down. Ruth Langsford rushed around the desk. Anthony, please, let me walk you out. I cannot apologize enough for this. As Ruth guided him toward the exit, the other panelists sat in awkward silence. The audience was buzzing, people turning to each other, shocked by what they'd just witnessed. Janet Street Porter broke the silence. Well, that was absolutely disgraceful. Denise, you should be ashamed of yourself. Denise slumped back into her chair. Oh, shut up, Janet. You're just jealous because I'm not afraid to say what I think. There's a difference between saying what you think and being cruel, Janet fired back. What you did there was cruel, plain and simple. Colleen Nolan looked like she might cry. I can't believe that just happened. That poor man. He's Anthony Hopkins, for goodness sake, a living legend, and we just humiliated him on live television. I didn't humiliate anyone, Denise insisted. He humiliated himself by being so sensitive. The producer's voice came through their earpieces, clearly panicked, trying to salvage what was left of the show. But the damage was done. The atmosphere in the studio had completely shifted. What should have been a highlight, having someone of Hopkins's caliber on the show, had turned into a disaster. Backstage, Ruth walked with Hopkins toward his dressing room. I am so sorry, Anthony. I don't know what got into her today. That was completely unacceptable. Hopkins gave her a gentle pat on the shoulder. It's not your fault, Ruth. You tried to stop it. You and the others. I appreciate that. We should have done more, Ruth said, shaking her head. We should have shut it down immediately. We should have stopped the interview right there and then. You can't control other people's behavior, Hopkins replied. You can only control your own response to it, and you responded with grace and kindness. Ruth's eyes were watering. I've admired your work for decades. My husband and I, we've watched every one of your films, some of them multiple times. To see you treated that way on our show, it just breaks my heart. Please don't let it break your heart, Hopkins said gently. I've been in this business long enough to have thick skin, but that doesn't mean I'll tolerate abuse. There's a difference between having thick skin and being a doormat. You handled it perfectly, Ruth said. The way you stood your ground, the way you articulated exactly what was wrong with the situation. It was masterful, actually. I wish I had your composure. Hopkins smiled. Composure is easy when you're clear about your values. I know who I am. I know what I will and won't accept. And I've reached an age where I simply don't have the time or energy to waste on people who don't value respect. They reached his dressing room, and Ruth hesitated at the door. Will you ever consider coming back? Not now, obviously, but in the future, when things are different. Hopkins considered this. I don't hold grudges, Ruth, but I also don't forget. And if circumstances were different, if the environment were different, perhaps. But I won't lie to you and say it's likely. I understand, Ruth said quietly, and I don't blame you one bit. Back on set, the remaining panelists were trying to continue the show, but it was like trying to steer a sinking ship. Denise sat there, arms still crossed, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Janet Street Porter addressed the camera directly. I think we owe our viewers an explanation for what they just witnessed. That was not okay. That is not how we treat guests on this show, and I want Anthony Hopkins to know that he deserved better. Colleen nodded vigorously. Absolutely. Anthony, if you're watching, we're so sorry. You handled that with such class and dignity. Denise rolled her eyes. Oh, please. You're both being ridiculous. No, Denise, Janet said firmly. You're being ridiculous. What, you attacked a guest for no reason. You were condescending, dismissive, and frankly nasty. And now you're sitting here acting like you did nothing wrong. I asked tough questions, Denise protested. Tough questions? Colleen's voice rose. You called his work boring. You said he plays the same character over and over. You mocked him for talking about his craft. Those aren't tough questions, Denise. That's just being mean. In his dressing room, Hopkins was gathering his belongings when there was a knock. It was a production assistant who looked mortified. Mr. Hopkins, I just wanted to say how sorry I am. We're all really upset. Hopkins smiled. Thank you, dear. That's very kind. You were brilliant, she continued. The way you handled it. Everyone backstage is talking about it. Well, I hope this doesn't cause problems for you all, Hopkins said. The production assistant shook her head. Don't worry about us. We're just glad you stood up for yourself. Back on the set, the show was limping toward a commercial break. The energy was completely dead. The audience sat in uncomfortable silence, occasionally whispering to each other. The panelists looked defeated, except for Denise, who still seemed to think she'd done nothing wrong. As soon as they cut to commercial, Janet Street Porter stood up. I can't do this anymore. I can't sit here next to you, Denise, and pretend everything's fine, when what you did was unforgivable. Oh, get over yourself, Janet, Denise snapped. No, I won't get over myself, and I won't get over what you did to that man. He came here as our guest. Our guest, Denise. And you treated him like garbage. Ruth Langsford returned to the set, her face pale. I've just been with Anthony. He's leaving the building. He was nothing but gracious, even after everything, which makes what happened out here even worse. Denise stood up abruptly. Fine. If everyone's going to gang up on me, I'll leave too. Sit down, Janet commanded. You're not going anywhere. You started this mess. You're going to finish the show. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Colleen Nolan sat with her head in her hands. Ruth Langsford looked furious. Janet Street Porter was practically vibrating with anger. And Denise sat there, isolated, defensive, refusing to back down. When they came back from commercial, the show had to continue. But it was painful to watch. Every attempt at normal conversation felt forced and hollow. The audience was no longer engaged. They'd come for light entertainment, and instead witnessed something genuinely disturbing. During another segment, Ruth brought it up again. I just can't stop thinking about what happened earlier. I've been doing this job for a long time, and I've never seen anything like that. Can we please move on? Denise said through gritted teeth. No. We can't move on, Ruth replied, because what you did reflects on all of us. When people think about loose women now, they're going to think about how we treated Anthony Hopkins, and that's on you. Janet leaned forward, her expression serious. Do you know what really gets me? Anthony Hopkins could have responded in kind. He could have torn you apart, Denise. He has the wit, the intelligence, the life experience to have absolutely destroyed you with words. But he didn't. He took the high road. He was dignified. He was measured. And that makes your behavior look even worse by comparison. I don't need a lecture from you, Janet, Denise snapped. Clearly you do, Janet shot back, because you still don't seem to understand what you did wrong. Colleen cleared her throat, her voice soft but firm. I keep thinking about the moment when he said you wanted a target, not a conversation. That really struck me, because he was right, wasn't he? But from the very first question, you weren't interested in what he had to say. You just wanted to provoke him. That's not true, Denise protested weakly. Then explain the first thing you said to him, Ruth challenged. You told him his film was boring. His film, which he'd poured his heart and soul into, which took months or years to make, which represents the work of hundreds of people, and you just casually dismissed it as boring. Why would you do that? Denise shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I was being honest about my opinion. But why lead with that? Colleen asked. Why not ask him about his process? About what drew him to the role? About working with the director? There are a million questions you could have asked that would have been interesting and respectful, but you chose hostility. I don't think I was hostile, Denise said, though her voice lacked conviction. Janet let out a bitter laugh. You don't think calling someone's life work boring to their face is hostile? You don't think mocking method acting is hostile? You don't think suggesting he plays the same character in everything is hostile? The audience was riveted. This wasn't what anyone had expected when they'd gotten their tickets for Loose Women that day. They'd come for light chat and celebrity gossip. Instead, they were witnessing something raw and uncomfortable and completely unscripted. An audience member raised her hand, and before the producers could stop her, she stood up and spoke. I just want to say that I've been watching this show for years, and I'm absolutely disgusted by what I saw today. That man deserved respect, and he got nothing but abuse. Other audience members applauded her words. Denise looked around, clearly surprised by the unified response. Thank you, Ruth said to the audience member. And you're absolutely right. Another audience member stood up, emboldened by the first. My daughter studies drama. She looks up to Anthony Hopkins. And I just watched her hero being treated like rubbish on television. How am I supposed to explain that to her? I'm sorry, Colleen said to the woman. Your daughter sounds very talented, and she's chosen an excellent role model. A third audience member, an older gentleman, rose to his feet. I'm 82 years old. I've been watching films since I was a boy. Anthony Hopkins is one of the finest actors I've ever seen. What happened here today was a disgrace. The audience erupted in applause again. Denise sat rigidly, her jaw clenched, her eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance. Ruth turned to address the audience directly. I want to thank you all for speaking up. Your voices matter, and you're right to be upset. We're upset too. Well, I'm not upset, Denise said loudly, cutting through the moment. The studio fell silent. Even the producers off camera seemed to freeze. What did you say? Janet asked slowly. I said I'm not upset, Denise repeated, her voice defiant. I asked questions. He couldn't handle them. That's not my problem. Colleen's mouth fell open. Denise, how can you sit there and say that? After everything that's happened? After what everyone has said? Because it's the truth, Denise insisted. I refuse to apologize for doing my job. Ruth's voice was ice cold. Your job is not to attack guests. I didn't attack anyone, Denise argued. You absolutely did, Janet said firmly. And the fact that you can't see that is deeply troubling. Janet Street Porter leaned forward. I want to say something directly to anyone watching who might be in a similar situation. What we saw today was a perfect example of workplace bullying. Someone in a position of power using that power to belittle and demean someone else. It's not acceptable in any context, whether it's a television studio or an office or anywhere else. Denise's face was bright red now. I am not a bully. Then what do you call what you did? Colleen asked quietly. I call it doing my job, Denise shot back. Your job is to bully guests? Ruth asked incredulously. The show continued in this painful fashion, lurching from one awkward moment to the next. Every attempt to discuss any other topic felt meaningless after what had transpired. The Hopkins incident hung over everything like a dark cloud. During a discussion about a completely different topic, Janet brought it back around. You know what struck me about Anthony's response? He didn't shout. He didn't get aggressive. He simply stated his boundaries and left. But that's real strength. He showed more maturity in those few minutes than we've seen from some people all day, Ruth added, looking pointedly at Denise. Denise threw her hands up. Are we going to talk about this for the entire show? Maybe we should, Colleen said. Maybe this is the conversation we need to have. I've interviewed hundreds of people, Ruth said. And I've always tried to treat every single one with respect and dignity. And that's the baseline. Not everyone deserves respect, Denise muttered. The other three panelists turned to stare at her. What did you just say? Janet asked. I said not everyone deserves respect, Denise repeated. Respect has to be earned. Anthony Hopkins has earned respect 1,000 times over, Colleen said. What more does someone have to do? It's not about awards, Denise argued. Then what is it about? Ruth demanded. The audience was completely engaged. Watching this unfold in real time, Janet Street Porter shook her head. I've lost all respect for you today, Denise. The feeling's mutual, Denise snapped back. The show somehow made it to the end. When they signed off, the panelists didn't do their usual goodbye. Ruth and Janet walked off without a word to Denise. Colleen lingered, but ultimately left too. Denise sat there alone as the crew shut down equipment. The audience filed out, talking about what they'd seen. The studio was cold. Hopkins' words echoed through the space. About using a platform responsibly. About strength versus weakness. About treating people with decency. Basic concepts forgotten.